Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar. My name is Charlotte and I will be monitoring the chat and helping if you have any technical issues throughout. Today we'll be focusing on FME Form. Your host for today will be Martin Lufkin and I'll hand over to him shortly. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. You have all been placed on mute, however we welcome your comments and questions. Type in these into the question panel. We'll address these at the end of today's webinar in the Q&A session. If we don't get a chance to answer your question, don't worry, we will follow up with you afterwards. Finally, today's webinar is being recorded and we will share the link with you after the webinar via email. Over to you, Martin.
Excellent, thank you very much. So welcome to this one spatial webinar. We're going to be looking at using the Workspace Compare tool in FME Form. So thanks for joining us. I hope it's going to be a useful session for you. Now, some of you may have already started using this fairly recent addition in FME Form, and hopefully this recap will be useful just to go over some of the features that can be useful to you, but also as an introduction to those of you that haven't used it yet. My name is Martin Lufkin. I'm one of the FME consultants at One Spatial, and I've been a big champion of FME for over 12 years now. So why have a compare and merge tool in FME? So for many years, FME has been compared to equivalent coding technologies. And one of their strengths is this ability to be able to collaborate on the same piece of code, comparing differences and merging parts of code together. And up until recently, FME has been primarily used by a sole individual to either author or run or maintain their own or other people's workspaces. But increasingly, more recently, the need to collaborate on workspaces has become something much more important for FME users. So last year, as part of this drive towards a more collaborative approach to authoring workspaces, SAFE introduced the Workspace Compare and Merge tool. It was a beta tool, and in 2023, it's become a fully fledged part of the functionality in FME Form, now just called the Workspace Compare tool. It's also, for your information, it's also moved location. So in 2022, it was under the File menu, whereas in 23, it's now under the Tools bar. But in both 2022 and in 23, you can access it using Control-Alt and C if you're into using shortcuts. So what does it do? So the simple answer is that it compares two differing workspaces and gives you the ability to port changes from one into the other, either as individual items or settings or as grouped selected changes. So looking at that in more detail, the changes found that are highlighted are only those that affect how the workspace runs at runtime. Okay, this is a key element to remember. So transformers, settings, connectors, readers and writers, etc. It also only compares transformers with the same name. So any changes in the names of your transformers between workspaces will result in the compare tool seeing new transformers on one side and missing ones highlighted on the other side. So be aware of this, especially if you have more than one of the same transformer on your canvas. The numbering system within FME of multiple transformers, duplicate transformers, might come into play here, especially around larger workspaces and more complex changes. So it's probably worth mentioning this a little bit more. So just in general in FME, when you bring a duplicate transformer onto the canvas, it searches for the next available number in a sequence and gives it that number. So for example, on our screen now, we see a point on area overlayer. If we brought in another one, it would automatically call it a point on area overlayer _1. and if you brought in another, it would be _2, etc. Now, if you had 4 or 5 of these and you decided to remove _3, it would leave a hole of _3. Now, if you then brought another one back into your canvas, the sequence would carry on, but FME would fill the gaps first. So it would bring in an _3 rather than an _5 or 6. So just be aware of this logic and this method, because it does make a bit of a difference when we're trying to compare transformers based on their name, especially for larger and complex workspaces. Also, it only compares the active tab in your workspace. So if you have multiple tabs across the top, or if you have, say, the editable tab open for a custom transformer, for example, the Workspace Compare tool will not compare these. So changes are color-coded, and they're shown on the canvas and in the list view. So if it exists on the left but not on the right, it will be a shade of blue. And if it's on the right but not on the left, it'll be a shade of purple. In the middle there, we see a shade of yellow and brown. And this is for when an element might exist on both sides, a component might exist, but the settings within that element differ between the two versions. So if we can jump across to our FME instance here, we can see we've got 2 transformers that are yellow here, and if we click on in the settings in the sampler, we can see that there's a change within that sampler, and it highlights within that change as well. We can also see there's a purple over here, which is where it's available on the right, but it's not on the left. And we can also see a blue one in this on the left-hand side, which is a new transformer, which is not it's not been found on the right. And the reason it's not been found is because of this name. The name is different across, so it's not joined these two together. It's also worth mentioning, while we've got this on the screen, is that also the connectors are also coloured as well. The connectors are compared. So we can see these 3 purple connectors, which aren't in the editable version on the left, and we've got these blue ones, which are saying they're on the left, but they're not on the right. So we've looked at what it does compare. What doesn't it show? So one of the major things that the compare tool doesn't show is positioning. So if you move a transformer, or even maybe if you add a node in your connection path, these will not show as a difference, because it's all about whether or not the workspace will still perform the same at runtime. Again, that same logic applies to bookmarks and annotations. These are not compared, and they will not be highlighted as differences, again, because it's not affecting the behavior at runtime of the workspace. And it's also worth mentioning, again, transformers or readers or writers that might be in the same position on the canvas, but maybe have different names. These won't be compared because the names, the comparison tool hasn't joined those two components together. And finally, logic within custom transformers is not compared. Although what is compared is the settings within the cog of a custom transformer. They are compared, and we can see that happening here. So if we move across to our spatial sorter over here, you can see that it's yellow. And if we go in there, we can see that there's some changes in the precision here in the custom transformer. So it will highlight the changes at the settings level, but not actually within the custom transformer itself. So let's move on to a little bit of a quick tour of some of the new functions and buttons available to us in the compare view. So once you've selected your two workspaces to compare, you'll notice on the right hand side it will be read only up here, and then on the left hand side is your editable version. This might be perhaps on the left will be your old version, and the right hand side might be a version that you've received from someone developing, and perhaps they're developing on top of your original version. So within the view here, we can see a middle toolbar appear between the two comparing workspaces, with a few new buttons made available to us, just down the middle here. So we're going to go through these in turn. So the first one at the top is the swap button. So if, for example, the person working on your original workspace has perhaps made a bit of a hash of their version, you might want to swap them around so that you can use your version as a reference to clean up their attempt. So you can just simply hit swap, and your original becomes the read-only copy, and you're now editing the newer, messed up version. So next down we have the nav button, which expands and collapses the navigator window on both workspaces at the same time. Now, this is really useful because in the navigator window, no changes are highlighted. So actually, for a lot of purposes, this is actually fairly redundant, this navigator window. And actually, it's taking up quite a lot of valuable screen estate. So for a lot of purposes, I'd recommend hiding this unless there's something in particular in the navigator you wish to look up or to modify. And we can just untick that and it will take it off. Gives you a bit more of a simplified view of your canvas, especially. The sync button is the next button down, and it's a handy extra function that locks the two workspaces together when zooming or panning. It's really helpful for large, complex workspace comparisons because actually it can get quite easy to get lost with two workspaces open at the same time. So you can simply toggle it on and off depending on your preference. Toggling it on pulls the read-only workspace on the right in line with the one on the left. So we haven't got it on here. So if we just zoom in and we decide actually we want to go here, and then we're actually a little bit lost, we can't find where we are on this side, we can just hit sync, and it will pull the right-hand side to where I've navigated to on the left, and it works with the zoom and the pan. So once it's on, we can now see that we can pan around and the two are in sync, so we can see what we're doing as a nice comparison. So there's the swap, the nav, and the sync. So moving a bit further down the center column of buttons, we find next is the help button. And as per usual, SAFE's help documentation for this functionality is very visible, it's very accessible, and it's great to be able to see it front and center in this tool. It's also worth mentioning that there is an extensive help section here, all about integrating this functionality into your Git repository, if you so wish. So just click on the Git integration help, and it will give you a good breakdown of how to integrate this into your Git repositories. A filter is the next one down, and this lets you find specific component differences in the workspaces, such as maybe just transformer changes, or perhaps just connector changes, if you so wish. We'll look at the list of filters when we move into looking at the list view in a few more minutes. But as we can see, we can hit filter and we've got our list of things that we can filter on or filter out, depending on what we're interested in. And finally, at the bottom, there's copy to left, which is the big red button, which takes any selected items or settings within the right-hand side workspace and updates the left-hand side with exactly what is on the right. It actually stays grayed out. I haven't got it grayed out because I've got something selected, but it's grayed out and unhighlighted until at least one difference is selected. So we've got some differences here. We can select through them. And we can see it's grayed out until we hit, we want to update this and we want to copy it across. Okay. So as well as the canvas view, we also have the list view at the bottom. This shows differences grouped into their respective component types, which can make searching easier if you know specifically what you're looking for. It's also very useful because if your changes are due to something taken from the navigator window, such as parameters, the canvas isn't going to show you those highlighted, but the list view will. It gives us a chance to see those differences in those parameters. So user parameters, workspace parameters, including even some flow and server parameters in there that, like I say, wouldn't be seen on the canvas. The list view also gives details of the differences between the two, and if the differences are yellow, so i.e. appears in both but have changed settings, hitting the details button gives you a like-for-like comparison of settings with those changes highlighted, and the option to edit the left-hand side at this point as well. So as we can see, we can go into our settings down here. This view we can make slightly bigger. If we go back to our navigator window, I've actually changed a workspace parameter. I've updated the name to change the name, and also the, let's have a look at that, and the category to coordinates. They haven't been set on the right-hand side. So we can go down to our workspace parameters down here, and we've got category details, and we can see it's in yellow what I've changed, and I've got the option to edit here. And if we go to the name one, it's the same window, but it's highlighting the fact that I changed the workspace name, and that's in yellow as well. So each workspace parameter is going to be an individual item at the bottom. So the list view also especially comes into play when you have, for whatever reason, perhaps repositioned your transformers but kept the same name. Maybe you can't find the equivalent on the left-hand side canvas, and you want to check you're still comparing like for like. Comes back to the whole idea of the transformer naming limitation that we've got. We might want to just compare that those are actually doing the right thing before we copy to left. It's very useful for doing that, because you can actually highlight the bits of the workspace even if the transformers are a long way apart on the canvas. So to update the left-hand side from here, again, you can just highlight the component or multiple components using the Control or Shift button, and you can hit copy to left. So just a nod again towards the filter button. So we can see the filter button here. It gives your list view a simplified outlook on the elements that you're interested in. It's also, I find it useful as a good tool to help me remember which components are actually being compared within this tool and what is not being compared. So if you're using the filter, the button changes appearance to show that you've got some filtered results. So if we hit filtered and we say maybe we're not interested in connection paths or readers and writers, we know about those, and we close that, we can see we've got a filter with a slightly different style, and we've also got the number of changes that we've filtered down to based on the total number of changes, which is quite a useful little image there. And we can see that our list is now a lot less. We don't have connectors or readers and writers in here anymore. We do have our feature types though, just not the readers and writers. It's also worth mentioning here that we've done our filter and we've filtered out connections, and you can see that our connections are still just about very subtly coloured correctly in the blue and the purple. If we filter those connections back on, you'll see they're a bit more prominent. So they're still being compared. You're just filtering out the results that you're seeing, but they're still available to us. So that's the list view. So when could this be helpful to you? So perhaps you've maybe received an update of your workspace from a colleague, and you want to see what they've done. Maybe you need to modify your production-ready version workspace with a couple of changes that have been made, but perhaps not everything, not all the changes. Maybe you're testing new changes to an already running production workspace before you want to incorporate them in. Maybe you've made an error and you can't track back using the history functionality, so you'll have to compare versions of Workspace. Or maybe even you're reviewing another user's workspace and you need to give feedback in another copy of the workspace. I've used this for reviewing in this exact instance. I've reviewed some workspaces where I don't necessarily want to make changes to their workspace. So I've taken a copy and I've put it into the compare tool, and I've updated what I needed to show in terms of efficiencies and different transformers in and out, just changing things around, the workflow around, and then sending that back to them. And then they can use the compare tool as well to then see what changes I've made and reference maybe some of the annotations and notes that I've made alongside some of the change transformers. So I have one final tip when using the compare and the compare tool, and that is, if you do have room to stretch the window across two monitors, I would really recommend it. It gets quite cramped all in one screen, and especially if you've got the navigator window on and you need that on for some reason. But it's quite useful to be able to stretch it out, and the delineation down the middle with the buttons, it lends itself quite nicely to being stretched between two monitors. And the spacing the workspaces out across two screens just gives a much easier working experience. Okay, thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions?
Thanks for that, Martin. Some great tips in there. We've had a couple of questions come through. Okay. The first one is there capability of running either workspace whilst using the tool?
Okay, so yes. So as you can see, we've still got the toolbar across the top. So we still have all the functionality that we have within the workspace to run. So we can run this left-hand side only. The right-hand side is read-only, but the left-hand side can be run. It can be run in cached mode. It can be run with all of the normal parameters and settings that we that we usually use at runtime. So yeah, full functionality there.
Brilliant, thanks. And another question is, how are transformer upgrades shown in the differences?
Okay, so transformer upgrades. So if you've ever come across the transformer upgrades, you'll see that you have different versions of the transformers, and between versions, these transformers may be upgraded. So in this case, we've got an aggregator here, and we want to upgrade that. So let's do that in real time. So we can upgrade our left-hand side from version 15 to 17, and we upgrade that, and we can see that it's gone yellow. So even the upgrades of a transformer will be shown in the compare tool. If we go in to look at the comparisons, nothing has changed in here except the version number at the top. So you can see that it's quite obvious to see that there's a difference in version between the transformers. Thanks very much.
Brilliant, thanks. That's all the questions we've had so far, unless anyone else has got any burning questions. No, I don't think there's anything else going through, so thanks for that, Martin.
Okay. So just to wrap up, just a couple of slides. Just a nod towards our Smarter Data, Smarter World conference that's coming up in November in London. Just to see what's happening in the industry and how OneSpatial are working with businesses in various different industry sectors to try and solve some data problems and find some solutions around that. If you're interested, go to onespatial.com and register for that. It's going to be a good day. And also, finally, just there's a few more FME webinars coming up in the coming months. So check out onespatial.com/news-events/events and webinars, and you'll see there's a few other little sessions which are really useful, a little bit like this, just to delve into a little bit of functionality. Whether you're familiar with them or whether you're not, there'll be something there for everybody, and hopefully that will spark your imagination about what else you can do and take your FME journey a little bit further. So and always feel free to contact us at FME@onespatial.com or support@onespatial.com, and some of our FME consultants, including myself, will be happy to help out with any problems or challenges you're finding within FME. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thanks Martin, and thanks everyone. See you on the next webinar.
Thank you everybody.